And I got a good amount of sewing done, so I'm ready to show you now how to square up our blocks. Now you might wonder, well, what size do I square them up to? I've done the math for you. So, I'm not sure. Yeah, you can see this. So we had 1.5 inch blocks, and we did 3 of them. 3 horizontally and 3 vertically. So 3 times 1.5 equals 4.5. Then I drew the blocks to help me understand how much was taken up by the seam allowances. Well, between block 1 and 2, there was 1/4 inch. But between block 2 and 3, there was 1/4 inch on each side. So it's 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. Well, I'm not a math genius, but even I know that equals 4 quarters equals 1. So then I take 4.5, subtract 1, I've got 3.5. So that's what I'm going to square my blocks, my 9 patches up to 3.5 inches. All right, so that's done. Now let me lower the camera so you can see me how I'm going to go about squaring this up. All right. Now, okay, so here is my 9 patch. Now, square up our blocks. Now you might wonder, well, what size do I square them up to? I've done the math for you. So, I'm not sure. Yeah, you can see this. So we had 1.5 inch blocks, and we did 3 of them. 3 horizontally and 3 vertically. So 3 times 1.5 equals 4.5. Then I drew the blocks to help me understand how much was taken up by the seam allowances. Well, between block 1 and 2, there was 1/4 inch. But between block 2 and 3, there was 1/4 inch on each side. So it's 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. Well, I'm not a math genius, but even I know that 4 quarters equals 1. So then I take 4.5, subtract 1, I've got 3.5. So that's what I'm going to square my blocks, my 9 patches up to 3.5 inches. Now let me lower the camera so you can see how I'm going to go about squaring this up. All right, here is my 9 patch. Now, remember I told you accuracy is not my forte, whether it's in cutting or piecing, but I'm going to show you little ways that I compensate. All right, so here's what we do. I want to square this up to 3.5 inches, okay? And to do that, I have taped off my ruler. See my ruler? This is a 4-inch ruler, so I counted over 1, 2, 3 inches and a half and put the masking tape. Just makes it so much easier instead of constantly double checking, triple checking to see if you have it right. Also, you may notice I took off the tape that I used to make the 1.5 inch squares because I'm trying to learn to do that so the tape doesn't leave awful residue on my beautiful rulers. So here I go. And since I don't have a square side yet, I'm not going to just place this along, I'm not going to take and just place this along the line and whack off this side, because then that might make this side too short and your eye will pick up on that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ease into this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is instead of placing this edge where I can see it along the tape, I'm going to kind of overlap it just a tiny bit so that I cut a little less than that 3.5. Then I come along, trim that off. All right, now I'm going to turn it around because you always do this side followed by this side, and then you'll do these 2 sides. So now I'm going to put it a little closer to this line, and it looks like it's coming up just a touch short. So what would I do with that then if it comes up a touch short? Well, there's a couple things that I can do. Let me get this other, let me see, which sides did I think I do these sides next. So lay this here. Okay, this side's a little touch longer. And even this up. Now, when I come back to do I know I've got a pretty good side there. I'll go ahead and line that totally up on the line. Okay, and let me put it on this line. Now what I'm doing, I'm making these two lines match, because by making these two lines match, I'm squaring the block. And I'm sure you've heard of that point. And that's just so that your block doesn't get skewed and you end up with it kind of looking, I don't want to pull it out of shape, but you know what I mean, if it's not perfectly horizontal and vertical with the seam lines. So now I'm going to come back here, put it one more time, line it up with my tape, and I see that I have this side right here is just a wee bit short. This block was the culprit, just a wee bit short. So what should I do to fix that? I can show you the answer. I'm good at that because guess what? I make this mistake often. This is the piece that's going to end up fleshing out the heart. So what I'm going to do is make this a little shy of the edge. I want to get back some space. It's like where it wasn't quite 3.5, how can I make the finished piece a little touch bigger? See what I'm doing right here? I'm kind of shortening this because it's already a touch too short. So, see how it's just, I've shortened it just a touch? This way, when I sew my seam allowance, it'll make it seem like this is a little bit longer this way, because if I put it all the way to the edge of this and sewed 1/4 inch, then I've reinforced the fact that that part is too short. By backing it off just a little, I give it back a little bit of space. And that might sound confusing, but it does work. Let me show you here. And take my pins out. And what happens is, where if I sewed 1/4 inch along this edge, then this much would be gone, okay? But by shortening, putting less into the seam allowance, it's like I've still got a little bit more. So it just kind of evened up and compensated. So now these blocks are the size they should have been. And I'll show you one more time my seam allowance. And you can see how I just backed this piece off just a little to help make up for the fact that it was short. All right, now I'm going to take and press this. But while I'm waiting for my iron to heat up, let me remove a few things. Oh, forgot to close my rotary cutter. That is a bad habit I have when I sit and sew by myself. Okay, now, then I am going to take, and if you look at your pattern, you'll see that these go on adjoining sides of the 9 patch. All right, so I'm going to go ahead while I'm waiting for the iron to heat up, and I'm going to put this. Now, I know this side is already pretty good, so I'm going to run this, because this measurement across here, yep, is perfect. So, and this measurement across here is pretty darn, yep, that's pretty good too. So I'm going to go ahead and be able just to run this normally. So now I have the 9 patch by these 2 extensions that are going to make the heart shape. Can you kind of see how that's going to work? So let me press them really quickly. Turn you around here. And I wanted to show you, while I'm here pressing, I want to show you 2 other pressing things. All right. And see, I'm being careful. I'm not scrubbing. I'm trying to press and not scrub. We don't have to force it into submission, I promise. One of the things I did was, you've got your white 10.5 inch blocks, okay? I took my 10.5 inch square and I folded it in half and then folded it in half, making sure that my edges were pretty even, and then I pressed it. Now what that does is it gives me removable registration marks. So I know that I have to have one of the little shamrock lobes in 3 of these, and the 4th is for the stem. So that's one pressing trick that is a lot faster than measuring and drawing. How do you press these little pairs? I always press to the dark. Little things I do are go through these pairs, sewn pairs, and I put all of the darker blocks facing up. And I'll show you why in a moment. Also, I was going to show you, when you're sewing such little squares, it might be a good idea to shorten your stitch length. Because I noticed that on some of these, by the time I cut them with my little thingamajig here, the threads kind of popped out. The threads didn't go all the way to that edge. And that can be a problem when you start putting them together. That way, when I pull off one to press, it is as easy as you pull the dark piece back, and that way the seams are pressed to the dark. Alright, so it's easy because you just go along and you hold it like this, and when you run the iron into it, it pushes the seam the correct way. And most of the time when I'm sewing, I have audiobooks on. That's how I do my reading. I'm so busy doing handwork that it's hard to find time to read. So, now this is a tricky one. Which one's the dark? If you squint your eyes, just kind of squint and look at it, it'll help you see which one is the darker one. So, let me see if I can show you this way. I hold the dark in my hand, run the iron up, and that way it's automatically to the dark. And actually, with this, by pressing to the dark, it does help them nest. So I kind of alternated them to try to get a little bit of speckly, maybe even a little touch of sparkliness to this. I just easily put these double, 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 and then before I put this one on, I sewed another block to it. So now you can see from your paper pattern, you place this, and you can see now why you have, there's the heart shape, and you see why you have these. All right, so speaking of that, I've got one ready. This is the exciting part because I get to iron the Fusible on and it becomes a real heart at this point. So what I'm going to do, and I'll press the back whatever way you have of, they just worry that these little points, I mean, if you think of how many pieces of fabric, 4 pieces of fabric come together at this one little point. So, but she has pretty good directions in the tutorial about how to spread out the bulk. And I have these. So, what I'm going to do now is decide where do I want the heart to sit on this. Because once I press it, it's down. So, you can take them up, but then you lose a lot of your stickiness. So anyway, here is this. I'm going to come over with my nice hot iron. And remember what we said, do not scrub. Do not scrub. And I'm going to press this. All right. Let's press and press. Do not scrub. And you want it firmly down with a nice hot iron. Usually follow the directions on your Fusible. But do not overpress. Because as I told you, if you melt that Fusible to a point that it dissolves apart, it will become part of the fabric and lose the adhesion. I hope that, ooh, it's warm. I hope that makes sense. Here also, I have put the Fusible on a piece of fabric, and this is going to be a stem. Now, if I were to do this over again, which I probably will do another one, I was thinking the stems would be cute, scrappy. So you could take and make your own scrappy fabric by sewing little bits together, maybe in this, across this way, and you could have a scrappy stem. So that's something I might do for my next one. All right, so now I have, this has the Fusible already on it, and I'm not cutting the paper, I'm just cutting the fabric around the edge, okay? And try to cut it carefully. You want it nice and smooth. The stitches, the blanket stitch or the zigzag, whichever one you use, will kind of cover up if you have any little wobbles and bobbles on the edge of your fabric, but it won't cover that much. So take your time. Now, I love doing product endorsements if it's something that I love, something that works for me. And I have to tell you, these little Fiskars are wonderful. The reason I like them so much is they're built on a spring system. So I have large hands, and instead of having to put my hands into scissors, here's a pair. So what happens, every time I pick these up, I have to put my fingers in. That's not that big of a deal, but to keep right by my sewing machine all of the time, this I just pick up and I'm ready to cut. I don't have to put my fingers in anything. And since I have big fingers, it's nice not to get them hung up in the smaller scissor holes. So these are so nice because they act like snips, but you can do a little more with them. On my frame, I keep a little pair of snips. You know what snips look like. They in fact, I have, here are some snips, but they do have a finger hole, which is nice because let's say you don't want that, you can decide what finger you want to put them in. But this is nice because you can kind of hold it a little bit easier. But these are snips, and these are kind of a scissor snip, and I just love these to bits. I have several pairs of these. At first I thought $12 for a little pair of scissors. Oh, they're worth every penny, every penny. All right, so now the Fusible is on the heart. Is that the cutest? I love this. All right, so remember I already scored the paper. So look how easy it is to remove the paper. And that pen just scratching across did an excellent job. When I used to have to try to tear off little pieces, it was a mess, and the static would make it pieces stick to you. I love instant gratification. She really did a great job in writing this up, and great job showing pictures of each step. I love tutorials because they give you so many more photographs than just a pattern would. And I read in it that she doesn't want these all to touch. She wants them to have a little floating. I think it gives it the whimsy. And even this stem. This kind of has an angle like this. You have to keep it 3/8 of an inch from the edge because, when you're going to sew them together, you don't want it stuck in the seam allowance. But I'm not quite on the line. I've left just a little bit of space. The same thing with this. It's close, but not right on the line. Then my other two will go here. And that's, I'm assuming, what she did, because that's what I'm going to do. All right. And they're down. Isn't that cute? When I first saw this, I knew this would be a fun project. And how fast is this going to go together? I have this one, and then I'll come right back. We'll finish it up. I have a couple good sayings and a couple good product things to show you today. So I'll be back soon as I make some more. Okay, I'm back. And is this the cutest little thing? I'm so thankful that Joan Ford of Hummingbird Highway designed and shared this, and Bernina sponsored it. I love it. All right, so I've ironed everything else down. I've got my one last little shamrock lobe ready to go. Looks like it's laying flat, and I had starched the background, which I think helps a lot. If you ever want to just make sure, as long as you don't hold it on too long, you can go to the other side, bring the heat from that direction too. I think that's absolutely precious. And I love all the different colors in it. I wasn't sure how this was going to go, but I think it brings a little sparkle to it. I tested both thread colors and decided that there was just something about the brightness of this I wasn't as crazy about. So I've already loaded the dark green into my machine. And I also put in some darker gray bobbin thread. The one thing I wanted to remind you before I did this. So I've loaded the gray bobbin in. I've got the dark green in the top. Don't forget to change to a foot that has a big enough throat area so that you don't break your needle. Because honestly, I sew so often with this 1/4 inch foot, and I forget that it's just got one little tiny hole for the needle to go through. And if you try to do zigzag, you're going to break your needle and possibly throw out the alignment, your timing of your machine. So we don't want that. So I've got my new foot on there. Oh, and I got a new product in. I'm going to go ahead and tell you about it. Remember when I said be careful, don't get your thread caught when you're putting on the foot? Well, guess what? I did. Let me try that again. Pull this thread up forward so I don't get it under my foot. Because then it'll just hold on to that thread, not let it move through the machine, and then you got a mess. Okay. I found on eBay some sewing machine lights to my sewing machine. And I am so excited to try them because I had gone to a retreat and they were all talking about the ones that were out there. And I did like the ones because they had a dimmer switch on them, and these don't. But these were less than $5 a piece. So I'm hoping that next time we're together, I can actually put a set of them on this machine. And let's give it a try. Because I tell you what, the older I get, the more important the lighting is. What I'm going to do, I like to start out doing, and I'm going to go ahead and find a good blanket stitch, which I just did. And I like to start on a straight side because that kind of gives me a chance, before I have to start doing curves, it gives me a chance to get my sea legs, so to speak. So, first I use the wheel to turn by hand because I want to make sure that I have the fabric at the right part to get it caught by the stitch. So I'll run it through an entire stitch just to make sure I like where it's placed. And I do. So here I'm going to go ahead, and I don't need to rush. I don't need to rush because I haven't done a blanket stitch in a while. And like I said, if you wanted it to look thicker, you could use a floss. And you know what? I'm not liking this stitch. I'm going to, let me try and, I changed the stitch I'm using. Let me see if I like that better. Oh, I like this much better. Let me see. I think I like it much better. Let's see. This is the thing. Yes, this is much better. Oh, isn't that pretty? This is the thing I like about doing these videos live. Well, they're not truly live, but doing them in one take. Because you get a chance to see all the different decisions that go into quilting. Okay, so I'm going to do a needle down. I love the needle down part of this machine because it allows you then to spin the fabric without losing your place. That way your stitch doesn't just jog out into space. But now I've got this turned. I'm so glad I tried a new stitch. It was a Quilter's Dream Pro, and I remember when I got this. This was only my second new machine in my life, and I bought this back in 2005. And I just felt all kinds of special. So, I loved it. Oh, and did I tell you about it? It was acting up, just something small. So I decided I better take it in and get it fixed. So I loaded it into my car, and I was later leaving than I wanted. So I thought, I'm going to drop it off on the way to work. Well, I set it on the seat of my minivan. And when I got to the shop I bought it from, I used the automatic door opener to save time, not knowing that it shifted as I was driving. It fell out onto its head. And of course it scratched and things, but the main thing is it broke the main drive shaft. It cost me $250 to have it fixed, and that's back when that $250 was precious money. It broke my heart. I showed up at work in tears, and they were like, what in the world? My sewing machine fell out of my car. all right, so as you can see, this is going around pretty good. Now, when I first started learning, it wasn't this easy to guide the fabric around. This took a lot of time to learn, and just go slowly. That's why you've got a speed adjustment, and depending on how hard you push on the foot pedal. All right. Oh, good. Needle went down again, so I'm going to come back. I think you saw me. I didn't pull my seam ripper out, and I don't want to be hunting for it right now. So I'm just using the sharp tips of this little scissor to pull out the majority of the stitches. I'm going to go ahead and stitch over it, and then later on, when I go and just fix any little weird places, I can take out the wayward stitches. As long as I have them unhooked in enough places that I can pull them loose, that'll be fine. Right, okay, so now, I know some of you probably cringed when you saw me so cavalierly using sharp points on fabric. I've had opportunity to damage my fabric before. I'll be honest. I've made every mistake you could think about. All right, so now I cut that, and once I take out the few little wayward stitches, I think that did a nice job. So, I will end up, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the stem while I'm with you. And then I have some product. Whoops. Let me see if my thread is going to act up. Let's see. You never know. Every once in a while that thread starts whipping around and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I pulled it off out from under the needle oddly. Oh, it's looking really good. Okay. I hope this is not driving that camera crazy. But this way, you know, and the other two Shamrock lobes I'll do just the same. But just take your time, and when you go around that corner, just be gentle, and you can go faster on the straightaways. The main thing is just go back over your initial stitches. I'll do this slowly, but go far enough over them that they will not come apart. So overlap those beginning and end, especially with a stitch like this. All right, so now this block is half done. I just have to do around these two lobes, and this block is done. And then I'll follow the instructions for placing the sashing and the border. And you've got those instructions too. Send me pictures of your Shamrock block if you're making one. I would love to see them. I have an email just for you to send me your comments and photos. So give me just a second. I'll put this away, and then, oh, I got some things to show you. Okay, the last time we talked, I talked about Inktense and ink-based pencils. And I kept telling everyone, look for the box with the peacock. Well, I went online and found the new box. I bought these 2 years ago. The new box has a whale, or like an undersea kind of thing. But here they are, Inktense 24. Now, these were about $25. I'd like to get the Inktense 75 pencils, but that's about $65. So I think that might be on next year's Christmas list. So anyway, here's the Inktense pencils. I'll even open them to show you. I love that they come in a tin so you can keep them nice and safe. And the end has the actual color, because sometimes the pencil tip doesn't show the exact color. And you may want to get extra whites. Boy, do I use this poor little white one. He's nice and short. He's been sharpened a lot. I use him a lot. All right, so that's the Inktense pencils. Then I mentioned the Inktense pastel type of shape. Well, they call them blocks. So here's what this box And I'm not sure what's on the box now. It might also be an underwater scene, maybe dolphins or something. And this is what they look like. Now I just want to caution you, use clean brushes and clean water, especially with the lighter shades, because the sticks, I leave the sticks just sitting right where they are, and you take and you put your wet brush in the color in these little pots in the center. But be careful that you don't end up getting some of your lighter colors muddy, because it's real hard to get rid of that. But these are ink products. They're fabric, they're meant for fabric, and once you press them, they are color fast. So really good things. And I enjoy them. These products are good if you want to do a larger space. And when you're being more specific, you can use the pencils. I like the pencils too because you can vary the intensity. You could put maybe a really intense edge on something just by the numbers of strokes you make with the pencil. So, boy, the sun is out today. Please remember to support your local quilt shops. Since the recession, we've lost so many of our small quilt shops in this state, and it's really sad because no shop can carry everything. So the more shops you have that close, the less opportunity you have to see the full range of products out in the sewing world. So make sure to show some good appreciation with your local quilt shop. And the best way you can do that is spend a little money there. Also, when you buy your sewing machines, it can be a very helpful thing to buy them from a shop because the service and follow-up you'll get is well worth the price. Especially, it's nice because they can teach you how to use your machine. And there's no sense having this lovely machine that you spent a good amount of money on and you don't know how to use every aspect of it. So I think I might put them in parts. So always if I say part 1, please check out part 2 or part 3. And I've got plenty of ideas working in my head. I talked about the lights, the new inexpensive lighting for your sewing machines. I have a giveaway plan and some interesting new projects. Plus, we need to get back to our landscape quilt. Part 3 of Landscape Quilt will be coming up in just a couple days. So thank you for the time you spend with me. You don't know what it means to me. When I sit and talk into this camera, I can kind of feel or see you sitting out there, and it makes me so grateful. I love our time to quilt. So have a great week. Bye-bye.